Mhm.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first podcast of Heritage Week 2024. My name is Iman Zahir, and I am managing Heritage Week. I just completed my freshman year at the University of Illinois, and I'm majoring in political science. I'm pleased to announce this podcast, Savoring Heritage, the culinary journey of Pakistani cuisine and its communities, featuring a distinguished journalist and author, Shanaz Ramzi. She is currently the Chief Executive Officer of StarLinks PR and Events and President of TravelinPk. She has been a prolific freelance journalist since 1994, contributing to various local and international publications. She is the author of several acclaimed books, including Footprints, An Epicurean Voyage Through Pakistan, Food Tales, and the Oxford Companion to Pakistani Cuisine. She has also edited various notable publications and has been twice nominated for the Gender in Journalism Award by UNESCO. Welcome, Shanaz. It's truly an honor to have you with us here today.
Thank you so much, Iman. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So let's just dive right in. What inspired you to write Pakistan's first reference book on Pakistani cuisine, Footprints?
Okay, so I wish I could take the credit for that and say it was my inspiration completely. But actually, I had been assigned by OUP, which is Oxford University Press, to write a book on cuisine for a children's series, illustrated series that they were taking out at that time. And the reason why they had approached me was because I used to do these reviews of restaurants and write on food quite a bit for Dawn and various other publications. So they thought I'd be the best person to do that. And when they approached me, I was very excited and I started working on that book. And they asked me to send them the contents of the book. That got approved. Then they asked me for the first chapter. That got approved. They told me to go ahead with the book. And then when I had started doing my research for it, they got back to me to say that they had scrapped that series altogether. So they were no longer doing illustrated series. And so they apologized and said they didn't need the book anymore. So by that time, I had already got so motivated into doing this book because this was the first book of its kind in Pakistan. There are lots of reference books on cuisine all over the country, especially in our neighboring countries. But no one had done a book on cuisine, a reference book on, for Pakistan. So I thought, since I'd already started doing my research, that I just continue with it, and I'll see later if I need to do a self publication. I'll do that. And so I decided that I would no longer be working on it as a book for children, but for adults. And I started working on that. So that's how Footprints came about.
That's really wonderful, and it sounds like you were really able to almost persevere and be able to work towards that small hardship in the beginning. And I know that documenting culinary traditions is also super important to preserving culture, which leads me to my next question of, do you want to share some key highlights from your recipe book, Food Tales? Some experiences you had writing it or anything like that?
So Food Tales was my second book, and that book is, as you mentioned, it's a recipe book, but it's a recipe book with a difference. So basically, there are lots of recipe books all over the world now, and I mean, at that particular point in time, to just a couple of years ago or so, to come up with yet another recipe book didn't make sense unless it was different. And the highlight of this book is basically that these are all recipes of dishes that I make and which I know are very, very popular. So I'm very fond of cooking, and when I entertain, and then when people eat these particular dishes that I create, and they always ask me for recipes, and I've always wound up giving recipes after every, dinner or lunch that I've had. I figured, why not just write a recipe book? So then what I did was that instead of just writing down all my favorite recipes that I make, I also wrote down next to the name of each recipe the person I had got the recipe from, because most of these dishes were dishes that I had gone to people's homes, eaten, loved the food that that I tasted, took the recipe, tried it out myself, maybe tweaked it a little to suit our tastes, further. And then once I was very happy with it, I would put it down in my recipe book. So basically, I what I've done is that I have given the credit to the people I took the recipes from, and some of the recipes have little footnotes at the bottom where I've given anecdotes about how I came about, having that particular dish and what happened, who made it, and so on. So it's got a personal touch to it, which people enjoy a lot. So yeah, that's about the second book.
It sounds like that book really sounds like a really immersive experience, and like you said, being able to put a spin on it with the personal touch of the footnote is a really wonderful idea, and I like how um it may remind other people of going to their friends' homes and their friends' recipes. So that's really great. Um, and in the idea of writing books and almost reviewing your friend's cuisine, I was wondering how would you approach the task of writing restaurant reviews? I assume it's challenging to capture the essence of dining in words, but how do you go about that?
So there was a time when I was doing restaurant reviews almost on a weekly basis because Dawn used to have a whole lot of magazine sections to their newspaper, and one of them called the Review used to have a section for restaurant reviews, and invariably I was submitting a review of a restaurant for that magazine. So much so that when people would meet me and would hear my name, they would relate me with my restaurant reviews and would tell me, oh, you're the person who writes those reviews. And we always eat wherever you tell us to go, and we always eat the dish you recommend. So
That's
they were very, very
amazing.
popular. Yeah, so I mean, and I used to find it a little strange that I write on so many different subjects and cover so many different topics and stuff. But the ones that were read the most and I think remembered the most were my restaurant reviews. But the interesting thing is that when I would do the restaurant reviews, because it was a regular feature, very often the people who would open restaurants would call up Dawn's review section, and they would ask them to send somebody to review the restaurant, and they would tell them that please let us know when they're coming, and we'll make sure that they have a good time, and they don't need to pay the bill. And I was very, very particular about the fact that I didn't want to go about it that way. So I would always tell them that I will not announce when I'm going because I don't want to be given preferential treatment. Otherwise, how will I know what their service is like if they're going to go out of their way for me? So basically, I would never tell them that I'm coming, and I would always pay the bill myself. People would always tell me, "Oh, you're having a great time. You're eating out here, eating out there, and not having to pay." I said, "No, I'm Jolly will make sure I pay." So my way of reviewing was very different from the trends that have now started, with bloggers and everyone going to review restaurants. They get paid for it, and I feel that how authentic can you be when you're going to charge somebody for a review that you're going to be giving? It's going to be biased. So our times were very different. We were very, very sort of professional about these things. So it was very different. Yeah.
It also sounds like the balance is a great way to, differentiate how to do the review, and I appreciate the way you approach that because I was thinking the exact same thing as you were saying that, wouldn't they know if you're coming? Wouldn't they have spectacular service? So I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that. That was the way that was done. And I guess building off of that, do you have a most memorable restaurant review you've written? Um, Good or bad, great experience, or I can't believe this happened.
Yeah, well, I've reviewed so many restaurants, and we've had so many diverse experiences. Because I would obviously never go alone. I would always go in company because the more of us are there, we can try more dishes. Just one person, how much can a person eat? So obviously, then it's not a fair review if you haven't tried out enough. So I always go in company. And I remember there was this one restaurant called Deja Vu, where we had gone to review it, and we were in quite a few people for that particular review session. And I think the owners guessed that I was reviewing it because they saw me taking notes and things. So after we had finished eating, then they came and they said, we'd like this to be on the house. And I said, no, I'm sorry, it can't be on the house. We had so many of us, and this is, I mean, there's no reason why it should be on the house. And I insisted on paying, and but I had loved the food, so I gave them a very good review. And the next time I went to dine there, I found that on their menu they had quoted me from my review in the Dawn magazine, and so the menu had my quotes about a particular dish and what I had to say. I was so thrilled, because I wasn't expecting that at all. And so that was one of the good experiences that I had. And I think they recognized me. And at that time, they insisted on paying for the food. But I had already done the review, so it wasn't such a big deal. But the other time that I had a surprising experience was when I had reviewed TGIF. That had opened, and again, they had been insisting, please send somebody, please send somebody. So I went and announced, and there were quite a few things I didn't like in their menu. So, and I'm normally my reviews are always very balanced. I don't just thrash any restaurant. I just don't just go praising it unnecessarily. I always give the good with the bad. So when I wrote the review for TGIF, I mentioned a few things that I didn't like and why I didn't like them. And they called up Dawn and they said, could you give us the number of this journalist? So they called me and they asked me, is it okay with you if they give my number? I said, sure, give it. Then they called me and so this was like a month or so after the review had been published. And they said, we read your restaurant review and appreciated it. And we've made changes to the menu and to the items that you had said that you didn't like, and for whatever reasons. And we would like you to come again. And we would like you to taste the food and let us know what you think of it this time. So I was so thrilled that they had taken such a positive stance, because basically Pakistanis by and large can't take criticism too well. So even if it's meant in the right spirit, they don't like being critiqued. But I love the way that they had responded, and that and I did go, and they had turned the food around quite a bit. So I mean, there are always different ways to taking a criticism, and I think this was the best way of doing it. So I remember that, yeah.
I truly think that's wonderful to also think that you had the impact to make people be proactive about what they were doing, and I certainly think that what you had said about people not receiving critiques very well is something, especially I assume in the food business, is hard to hear because some people may pour their soul into a dish and someone might not like it. Um,
Exactly.
so yeah. I guess we can move into more of your career side of things in terms of GM publications and public relations at Hum Network. And how did your role there give impetus to your food writing career?
So, as the GM of public relations, I don't think it really gave any impetus to my food career because that was a separate, because I was actually wearing quite a few hats while I was at Hum TV. And the public relations aspect was more to do with their dramas and their, the programs that were running on Hum TV, and I was promoting them and so on. But the publications aspect, yes, because I started off with editing quite a few of their magazines. Whichever magazines and books started coming out from Hum, I was editing them. And so there was Masala TV Food Mag, which was recipes in Urdu and English. And then have a lot of books that, their chefs who cook on their channel Masala TV. We had taken out a series of books of all the different chefs. So what happened was that when we took out all these books, Hum TV wanted me to speak to Oxford University Press, which I mentioned earlier, which is the biggest publishing house in Pakistan, and they wanted us to they wanted OUP to publish their books. So we had at that point we hadn't taken them out yet, but we were in the in the act of producing those books. So they asked me to speak to the managing director of OUP, who was Amina Sayed at that time. So I set up a meeting with her and I asked her, I said, we have all these fantastic recipe books made, all the recipes are by these famous chefs and we'd like you all to publish them. So she said that unfortunately, Oxford University Press is basically it's a teaching. The kind of books that they take out are all very educational and informative. So they don't really do books that are either coffee table or recipe books per se. So she said if instead of this, if you had a book where they would be talking about, say, the history of our cuisine, why it was developed, about the communities that create it, or the utensils used, or the ingredients used, I'd be interested. But just a recipe book, I'm not interested in. And I was at that point at the stage where I had nearly, in fact, I think I had completed my own book, which I had started. If you remember, I mentioned that OUP had approached me initially, and then I had started writing the book myself. So I had already finished that book, and I had been looking for a publisher. And when she mentioned this, I said, "But I already had that kind of a book." And she said, "You do?" And I said, "Yes, because you had initially asked me to do a book for children, and then later you all scrapped the series, but I continued with it, and so I've already got a reference book on Pakistan cuisine." So she was very taken aback, and she said, "All right, why don't you give me the first chapter as a sample, and let me see what we think of it." So I sent her the first sample, and when I sent her the chapter, she called me up the very next day and she said, "Send me the entire manuscript." So I sent her the entire manuscript, and they have to send it to UK because they're affiliated to UK. So they sent the manuscript to UK, and then they got a response from them to go ahead with the book. So she called me up and she said they will publish it. So that's that's the impetus that my book got, because I was with HumTV working on the books for Masala. So we didn't get manage to get them to publish those books, but Oxford in the end did publish my book, my first book.
Yeah, that's amazing how, even one role that may have fallen out or came back really shaped your career's trajectory, if you will. And I guess you mentioned some of your editorial work from GLAM and Masala TV, and I know we briefly discussed some, small challenges, but were there any that were overwhelming, or how you overcame certain challenges? I guess maybe more specifically in not just the food world, but the writing world.
So the editing challenges that I found with all the publications that I've been editing is that there's zero professionalism now in the country, and the kind of the work that I would get, the kind of articles I would get from contributors, I would have to edit them so heavily that it was pretty much like my rewriting the entire thing. So it used to be very frustrating because I would feel that I would, I mean, it's much easier to write something on your own completely than to just sit and than to have to edit somebody else's piece, which needs so much work. And I would keep telling them, why don't you at least read your piece once? It's obvious you haven't even bothered to look at it, and you're sending me such crap. It's such so many proofreading mistakes, so many factual mistakes. Why don't you read it? But that's well, you're there as the editor, so we know you're going to look at it. So I mean, so this nonchalant attitude that she's the editor, she's going to look at it anyway, so let's just let it be. This used to be very frustrating. And the other thing that I found, so this was generally across the board, no matter what publication I was editing. But for Masala, it was very challenging because my Urdu used to suck at that time. So I was never a great student of Urdu. And when I landed up taking out Masala TV Food Mag, it had recipes in Urdu and English. So what I did was I hired myself a very competent sub editor from the vernacular, you know, press, and I knew she was used to doing editing of Urdu press releases and stuff like that. So what I did was I sort of edited the English portion, and I let her look at the Urdu portion because I figured, what am I going to do to improve on what she's going to do? So I let her do the Urdu portion, and I handled the English portion editing. When the first issue came out, I was called by the management, and they said, "Did you edit this magazine?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Did you read this piece?" I said, when I saw the piece that they showed it to me, it was an Urdu piece. So I said, no. I mean, I gave it to the sub editor to edit that portion. They said, well, this is what she's written. Will you read it? And when I read it, it was full of mistakes, which I could make out that they were glaring mistakes. So I said, okay. I don't know how that happened, but all right. So I decided from the next time that the next issue, I was editing both the portions. So, and then sure enough, I would catch such silly mistakes for the Urdu portions also, that I think in the end, my Urdu brushed up quite a bit while trying to correct somebody else's. But so those are the challenges that I faced while editing at home. Yeah.
I think that that's really, important too because, well, personally, I can't say much that I know Urdu. So, most of the time for me, if anyone says anything, I just smile and nod and I pretend I know what someone's saying. So I'm personally also trying to brush up on my Urdu.
Right.
And I also think your dedication to authenticity also really shines through, and it's great that even though you did struggle with that, you were able to, figure out how to do it. And so I guess now, in your opinion, moving back to the cuisine side, do you think Pakistani cuisine has been evolving over the years, or are people still continuing to stay true to specific recipes? If it is evolving, do you like the direction it's going in?
No, I think it's evolving 100%, and I love the fact that it's evolving. I think it's great that we have we are embracing the changes, because it's always a good thing to be moving with the times. But at the same time, I feel that we shouldn't forget our heritage. We shouldn't forget what our authentic initial cuisine was, and we can improvise, and we can improve on that or make changes, move with the times. For instance, there were when my mother used to do cooking, or when my mother-in-law used to do cooking, we hardly ever used mechanical instruments in the kitchen. The grinders and blenders and all were not so common. They used to use the seal butter to do grinding of masalas, which used to be, it used to be quite a cumbersome process, and not just cumbersome, but also a very tricky process, because if you were grinding red chilies, for instance, your entire fingers would be burning by the end of it, and but the taste of those chilies is something that you will never get when you do it in a blender or a grinder, because it would be that freshly ground chilies with hardly any water mixed in, and it would be very, very well done. So all that is now changed. Nobody has that kind of time, that kind of energy, stamina, whatever, to go through all that. So yeah, we've evolved. We are using different ways of using of making our ingredients for our dishes. We've also started evolving in our tastes. There was a time when people were very restricted to their own communities. So, for instance, if it was a Bora community, they would only be eating their cuisine. If it was the Khojas, they would be eating only their cuisine. Maimans would be eating only their cuisine. Now, because of especially Karachi, has become so cosmopolitan, And Pakistan itself, I mean, now, they say that the world is shrinking, but actually it is shrinking. People are mingling so much, and when you mix with people from different communities, you get exposed to their cuisine, and you start, if you enjoy it, you start taking recipes from them, including it into your portfolio, making it so you there's a variety now in the kind of food that is now eaten. I remember when I was growing up, nobody had heard of khawswe. My mother would make it because she had a Burmese neighbor and she had learned it from her. And when I would, when we would have khawse at our house, and if somebody would come over, they say, "What is this? With the noodle kind of a dish?" They would never understand. Now everybody makes khawse. So it's just that it's becoming more because you're intermingling with people. Things are accepting. The acceptance is more. Malpuras were something that people had never heard of earlier. We used to make it because we had a background, the Gujarati background and the Bengali background, because these are things that have come from there. But most people had never heard of it. And then now you go to any wedding, one of the desserts that they serve you are malpuras. So these are things that they people have begun to start accepting, and I think it's great because it enriches your cuisine so much. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how food adapts and changes over time. And even for me in the United States, I'm second generation, so there's quite a big gap when it comes to my cooking skills. And so, if there's ever some leftover Pakistani food, even like with chicken makhni, I'll just make some pasta and add the chicken makhni to it and serve it to some of my
Right.
friends who are American, and they say, "What is this amazing pasta sauce?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Pakistani food." So it's really also great to see cultures coming together and bonding over cuisine. Um, so I guess also hopping off of that, how do you think the history of Pakistan has influenced certain culinary traditions, such as maybe changing dishes from other countries or making it more personalized?
So I think history's played a very, very important role in the evolution of our cuisine, because Pakistan has been one of those countries that has been exposed to a lot of invasions, and we've had people from various parts of the world who've come and lived in the region that is now Pakistan, and introduced their cuisine here. So, from Turks to Mongols to Persians to Scythians to Parthians to Hindus, Buddhists, you name it, we've had those people in Pakistan, Central Asian, and obviously when any people that come and stay for a prolonged period of time in any area, they do their own cuisine. They also adapt their cuisine to the cuisine of the region. So there are lots of changes that take place, not only in our cuisine, but even in the cuisine of the people who've come and settled here. And that's the reason why our culture is so rich, our cuisine is so rich. I think history has played a tremendous role in the development of our cuisine. The chapati that we eat today, that chapati was introduced in Indus Valley time, in Mohenjo-daro, when they found all, after they excavated, they found tawas, and they realized that they were being used to make rotis similar to the ones that are being made today. The malpuras I mentioned to you, they used to make pupas at that time, which was very similar to the malpuras that we are eating now. So history has played a tremendous role in the development of cuisine. Central Asia, Turkish, you will see lots of influences in the food in different parts of Pakistan. You'll find the influence in the northern areas more of Central Asian cuisine. You'll find Mughal cuisines influence more in Punjab. Wherever people have settled, you'll find their influences. So yeah, it's a good thing.
That's awesome, and I feel like food really does have a unifying power almost in that, bringing those communities together. Um, so we're actually almost starting to wrap up, which I have been loving this conversation. I just have about two or three more questions. And one is probably a classic one that you may get, but what would you give to uh, either aspiring food writers or people who are, starting out their cuisine journey? Someone like me who really does not know how to cook very well.
So, if you're talking about recipes, or are you talking about the research-based books? Because if you're talking about somebody who wants to write on cuisine rather than just recipes, I think these days it's so much easier than when I started the research for my first book, because at that time we didn't have Hazrat Google on our fingertips as much as we have it now, and now with AI and there's so many things. I mean, it's life is that much easier. But you have to make sure that you know that whatever you're doing, that whatever research you've got, it is authentic, and not take any shortcuts. That no shortcuts in life. So if you really want to do something and you want to make sure that it's 100% authentic, you do your research properly. When it comes to recipes, I think now it's with YouTube and with television channels, with so many cooking shows. People who are not into cooking also can learn very, very quickly, and get inspired very, very quickly. And it's great to improvise. So once you've learned something, you change it to your own taste. You were just sort of mentioning about what you did with the and made into pasta. Excellent. That's exactly the way to go. Do you know that Pizza Hut made its first chicken tikka pizza in Pakistan? I mean, nowhere else in the world, I
I
think they
had
have
no
chicken tikka
idea.
pizza. But they introduced it in Pakistan because that's the taste of the Pakistanis. They want to have chicken tikka everywhere. So they made chicken tikka pizza, and that was the most popular pizza that they used to have. So yeah, it's a way you don't. Sky is the limit. Don't restrict yourself. Just let it go. Let your creative juices flow.
That's fantastic advice, and I really appreciate that because, well, like I mentioned, maybe I just really need to sit down and find a few recipes that I can get good at, and then, hopefully start to build from there. Um, and my final question is, can you share a story about a particular dish or recipe that holds either significant cultural importance to you or historical, or both?
Mm, I don't know about whether it has a cultural or a historical importance to me, but I love the story behind it. Because when I was doing the research for, behind a lot of dishes that are eaten in Pakistan, and some of them have really very interesting stories. They may be legends. I don't know how many of the stories are true. Sometimes there are more than one or two stories behind the creation of a certain dish. But I love the one that I came across when I was researching mulligatawny. So I don't know if you're familiar with mulligatawny, but that is a soup which is partaken of in our part of the world. So in India and in Pakistan, it's a rich lentil soup, and it used to be very popular once in all the high-end restaurants and clubs and hotels would serve it. And when I was researching how the soup came about, I discovered that it was some Anglo-Indian kitchen. Its origin is Tamil, and this was actually made for at a time when there was the British Raj, because they're soup drinking people. Their soup is part of their cuisine. It's their starter before your main course. In our cuisine, soup doesn't play such an important part. We have the yakhni, but basically, Pakistani soup, don't think of soups as starters for their meals. So in order to serve the British people who wanted soup, the something that was closest to it was a water-based tamarind and pepper soup that the Tamils used to make, and it was called. It had a name which was very similar to Malikatoni, but it was like Mologatwani, or Molotani, yeah, Molotani it was called. So the cook decided that, I mean, somebody wanted soup and he didn't know what to do. So he just sort of put in lentils in that and put in a little bit of chicken, put in a little bit of rice, made a concoction of the soup and gave it to them. And then it came to be known as Malikatoni. It got sort of over the years, it got the name changed and became Malikatoni. So I thought that was a very, very interesting, story behind a soup that had come out. And it's one of my favorite soups. I just love it.
I think I have to try that now. And I think anybody who's listening on the other end in a few days definitely should try that. It sounds so fun and a great backstory. But thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us, Shanaz. And it was truly a delight having you join us for Heritage Week.
Most welcome. Thank you so much.